The great chamber of the Galactic Council had never been so full. Representatives from 47 species filled the curved seats that rose like waves toward the domed ceiling. Light from a dozen different suns filtered through the crystal walls, painting the assembly in colors that most species could not even see. This was the heart of galactic civilization. This was where the fate of worlds was decided. High Arbiter Verthax of the Kalani Dominion stood at the central platform. His scaled body gleamed under the lights, and his fur eyes swept across the gathered representatives with obvious satisfaction. He had waited 3 decades for this moment. 3 decades of building alliances, of whispering fears into willing ears, of preparing the galaxy for what he knew must be done. Fellow members of the Council, he began, his voice carrying through the chamber with the weight of absolute authority. We gather today to address a threat that grows stronger with each passing cycle. A threat that, if left unchecked, will consume everything we have built over 10,000 years of peaceful cooperation. The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew what was coming. Everyone had seen the reports, the projections, the terrifying statistics that Verthax had been sharing for years. I speak, of course, of humanity. On the far side of the chamber, Ambassador Sarah Chen of Earth sat in the small section reserved for humanity's delegation. She was a woman of 53 years, with gray streaks in her dark hair and the kind of tired eyes that came from too many late nights, reading boring diplomatic documents. She had been Earth's representative to the Council for 11 years now. She had heard this speech, or versions of it, many times before. She pulled out her lunch from her bag. A sandwich, turkey and cheese. The Varani delegate next to her gave her a horrified look, but Sarah just shrugged. She was hungry, and Verthax always talked for at least 2 hours. 50 years ago, humanity emerged from their single world and began to spread across their solar system. Verthax continued. At that time, we welcomed them as we welcome all young species. We offered guidance. We offered protection. We offered the wisdom of elder civilizations. Sarah took a bite of her sandwich. The guidance had been a list of rules that would have kept humanity in their solar system forever. The protection had been a demand for military access to Earth. The wisdom had been a suggestion that humans accept their place at the bottom of galactic society. She chewed slowly and watched Verthax wave his arms dramatically. And how did humanity respond to our generosity? With suspicion, with defiance, with a stubborn refusal to accept the natural order of things. Several delegates murmured in agreement. The Kalani had done an excellent job of spreading fear about humanity over the years. Stories about human violence, human wars, human weapons. All true, of course. Humanity had never hidden their bloody history. But the stories left out important context. They left out how humans had changed. They left out how humans had learned. In 5 decades, humanity has advanced their technology at a rate unprecedented in galactic history, Verthax said. They have refused to share their research. They have refused to allow inspection of their military capabilities. They have refused to accept any limitation on their expansion. Sarah finished her sandwich and started on an apple. The inspection demands had been particularly amusing. The Council had wanted full access to every human military installation, every research facility, every ship. In exchange, they offered nothing, not even basic respect. We can no longer ignore the threat they represent, Verthax declared. Therefore, I call upon this Council to authorize military action against the human species. A coalition of our 12 most powerful civilizations will deliver an ultimatum. Humanity will surrender their military assets, accept permanent oversight, and integrate into galactic society as a protected vassal species. If they refuse, they will face the consequences. The chamber erupted in noise. Some delegates cheered. Others expressed concern. A few, like the Varani beside Sarah, simply looked uncomfortable. But the vote, when it came, was never in doubt. Verthax had spent 30 years preparing for this moment. He had the numbers. The motion passed. 12 species committed their fleets. 10,000 warships would gather and move toward Earth. Humanity had 30 cycles to surrender or face destruction. Verthax turned toward the human delegation with triumph in all 4 of his eyes. Ambassador Chen, you have heard the will of the Council. What say you for your species? Sarah finished her apple. She wiped her hands on a napkin, then stood slowly. The entire chamber fell silent, waiting for her response, waiting for the fear, the anger, the desperate pleas that always came when a young species faced the combined might of galactic civilization. "Thank you, High Arbiter," Sarah said. Her voice was calm, almost bored. "I'll forward this to the appropriate department. Is there anything else on the agenda today, or can we move to the budget discussion?" Verthax stared at her. The chamber stared at her. Nobody spoke for a very long time. "Did you not understand?" Verthax finally demanded. "We have declared war on your species. 10,000 warships will arrive at your world within 30 cycles. You face extinction." Sarah nodded. "Yes, I understood. Very clearly explained. Thank you. I'm just wondering if this will conflict with the World Cup finals. My nephew is very excited about the matches, and I'd hate for him to be disappointed." She pulled out her communication device and began typing. The message was simple, another one. "Handle it." She sent it to Earth's Defense Ministry with the official declaration attached. Then put the device away. "I'll have an official response for you within a few hours," she told the stunned chamber. Now, about that budget discussion. The response from Earth arrived exactly 4 hours later. It was 3 sentences long. The first thanked the Council for providing advance notice of their visit. The second requested that the Coalition fleet avoid the shipping lanes near Neptune, as there was heavy cargo traffic in that area. The third wished them safe travels, and expressed hope that they would enjoy the scenic views of Saturn's rings. That was all. No threats, no demands, no panic. In the communication center of the Council station, a young Varani named Telix stared at the message on her screen. She had been assigned to monitor human communications for the past 2 years, and she had learned to expect strange things from this species. But this was beyond strange. She checked Earth's financial markets. They had not moved. She checked their news broadcasts. The declaration of war had been mentioned briefly, somewhere between a story about a politician's scandal and a report on unusual weather patterns. 12 minutes of coverage, total. Then they had moved on to discuss something called celebrity relationships. Telix felt a cold sensation spreading through her body. She had studied the responses of other species to similar threats. The Morthani had collapsed into civil war when faced with Council ultimatums. The Dreth had launched a desperate and doomed first strike. The Kelani themselves, centuries ago, had surrendered within hours of receiving such a declaration. Humanity had shrugged and gone back to watching sports. She began digging deeper into human records. Their history was public, freely shared with anyone who cared to look. And what she found there made the cold sensation grow stronger. Humans had been fighting wars for their entire existence as a species. Not occasionally, constantly. They had fought over land, over resources, over ideas, over pride. They had invented weapons that could destroy their entire world, then pointed those weapons at each other for decades while somehow managing not to use them. They had survived plagues that killed millions, disasters that reshaped continents, conflicts that should have ended their civilization a dozen times over. And they were still here, still building, still growing, still treating the universe like it was just another challenge to be overcome. Telix pulled up more recent records. 50 years of preparation, 50 years of knowing that the galaxy was watching, that threats would eventually come. What had humanity been doing during all that time? The records showed normal development, ships being built, colonies being established, technology being improved. Nothing unusual, nothing alarming. But Telix had learned something important about humans during her 2 years of observation. They were very, very good at keeping secrets, and they were even better at making their enemies underestimate them. She filed her concerns in a report that would probably never be read. The Council had made its decision. 10,000 ships were already gathering. In 30 cycles, the Coalition would arrive at Earth and deliver its ultimatum, and humanity would respond exactly as they responded to everything else that threatened them. Telix just hoped she would be far away when that happened, because she had a terrible feeling that the galaxy had just made a very serious mistake. The kind of mistake that changed the shape of history. The kind of mistake that civilizations did not recover from. But nobody would listen to a junior analyst. Nobody ever did. Somewhere on Earth, in a small house in a quiet town, A man watched the news report about the alien ultimatum. His wife asked him if he was worried. He laughed, kissed her forehead, and told her that dinner would be ready in 20 minutes. He had more important things to think about than some aliens who thought they were scary. After all, humanity had survived worse. The coalition fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system, like a storm arriving on a clear day. 10,000 warships stretched across the darkness of space, their hulls painted in the colors of 12 civilizations. The Kalani dreadnoughts formed the core, massive vessels bristling with weapons that could crack planets. Around them flew the sleek destroyers of the Morthany, the heavy cruisers of the Dreth, and hundreds of support ships from the other coalition members. Admiral Kethvorn stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and watched the human solar system grow larger on the view screens. He had conquered 3 worlds in his career. He had broken the resistance of species far older and more powerful than humanity. This would be his greatest triumph yet. "Begin broadcasting our rival," he ordered. "Let them know their judgment has come." The message went out on every frequency, in every language the coalition could translate. It was a masterpiece of intimidation, written by the finest psychological warfare experts in the galaxy. It spoke of the unstoppable might of the coalition. It detailed the destruction that would follow resistance. It offered one final chance for humanity to surrender and accept their fate. The response came 30 minutes later. It was an automated message from something called the Sol System Traffic Authority. It welcomed the coalition fleet to human space, assigned them coordinates for visitor parking approximately 2 billion kilometers from any inhabited area, and reminded them that weapons discharge within the inner system required permits. The permit application was attached. It was 17 pages long, required documentation in triplicate, and had a processing time of 6 to 8 weeks. Admiral Kethvorn stared at the message for a very long time. Is this some kind of joke? He finally asked his communications officer, a nervous young Kalani named Veth. "Check the message again. It appears to be genuine, Admiral." It came from an official human government channel. The Admiral turned back to the view screen. Earth was still distant, just a pale blue dot among the stars. But even from here, his sensors could detect the activity in the system. Ships moving along regular routes, communication signals bouncing between planets and moons, entertainment broadcasts washing over everything like background noise. A civilization going about its daily business without any sign of concern. "They must be preparing defenses," Kethvorn said. "Scan for military activity." The scan took several minutes. What it found made no sense at all. There were military vessels in the system, certainly, but they were not gathering into defensive formations. They were not powering up weapons. Some of them appeared to be conducting training exercises near Jupiter. Others were simply parked in orbit around various stations. Their crews apparently on shore leave. Perhaps they have not understood the threat, suggested Fleet Commander Yoroth of the Dreth. His species was known for their cautious nature, and his voice carried uncertainty. Perhaps they need a demonstration. Before Kethvorn could respond, a new contact appeared on the sensors. A small ship, civilian class, approaching the fleet at a leisurely pace. It broadcast no weapons signatures. It made no threatening moves. It simply flew closer and closer until it was within visual range. "Admiral," Veth said, "we are being hailed. Put it through." The view screen flickered and a human face appeared. A man, perhaps 40 years old, with a thick beard and a cap that read Martinez Cargo Services in human script. He was eating something, some kind of fried food in a paper container. "Hey there," the human said. "You folks need directions? You look a little lost." Kethvorn felt his scales tighten with anger. "We are the Coalition fleet. We have come to deliver judgment upon your species for crimes against galactic civilization." The human nodded slowly, chewing. Right, I heard something about that on the news. Big fleet coming to threaten everybody. Very scary stuff." He did not sound scared. He sounded like he was discussing the weather. "Anyway, if you're heading toward Earth, you'll want to take the inner route past Mars. The outer path has a lot of debris from some mining operations. Real pain to navigate. We do not need directions," Kethvorn growled. "We are here to conquer your world. Sure. But trust me, Take the inner route. Also, there's a great restaurant on Mars Station if you need to refuel. Best noodles in the system. Ask for Chen's place." The human paused, looking at something off-screen. "Anyway, I've got a delivery to make. Good luck with your conquest thing. Watch out for the speed traps near Venus. They're real strict about velocity limits in the orbital zones." The transmission cut off. The cargo ship turned and flew away without any sign of hurry. Admiral Kethvorn stood in silence. Around him, his bridge crew exchanged uncertain glances. This was not how conquered species were supposed to behave. This was not how anyone was supposed to behave when facing destruction. "Admiral," Yoroth said quietly, "perhaps we should reconsider our approach." "Reconsider?" Kethvorn turned on him with fury in his eyes. "We have 10,000 ships. We have the combined military might of 12 civilizations. We will not reconsider because some cargo pilot offered us restaurant recommendations." But even as he spoke, doubt was creeping into his mind. He had studied humanity before this mission. He had read the reports, watched the recordings, analyzed their military capabilities. Everything suggested they were a young species with limited technology, barely able to defend their own solar system. Everything suggested this would be an easy conquest. So why were they not afraid? On a small observation vessel at the edge of the fleet, Telix watched the data streaming across her screens. She had been assigned to the intelligence division of the coalition, a minor posting for a minor analyst. But she had been studying humanity for years now, and everything she saw confirmed her worst fears. The human cargo pilot had not been joking. He had not been brave. He had simply been honest. The coalition fleet was an inconvenience to him, nothing more. Something to be navigated around on his way to make a delivery. Telix pulled up the human entertainment broadcasts again. She had become slightly addicted to them during her years of study. Humans made the strangest things. Stories about love and loss and triumph and failure. Music that stirred emotions she did not know she had. Games where they pretended to be heroes, saving imaginary worlds. And war. So much war, she found a channel showing old human footage. Historical records from their past centuries. The images were disturbing. Humans fighting humans with weapons of increasing power. Cities burning. Armies clashing. Death on a scale that made her stomach turn. But the humans did not hide from these images. They studied them. They taught them to their children. They remembered every war, every battle, every lesson written in blood. And they kept going. They kept building. They kept growing stronger. The Kalani had not fought a real war in 300 years. The Dreth had not faced a serious military threat in 5 centuries. The coalition had grown soft, comfortable, certain of their place in the universe. Humans had been fighting for survival since the day they climbed down from trees on their homeworld. They had never stopped. They had never been allowed to stop. Telix thought about the reports she had filed, the warnings she had given. Nobody had listened. The coalition was too confident, too certain of their superiority. They saw humanity's small population, their limited territory, their apparent technological disadvantage. They did not see what those things really meant. Humanity had been holding back, watching, waiting, preparing for exactly this moment. She did not know what would happen when the coalition reached Earth, but she knew it would not be what Admiral Kethvorn expected. It would not be surrender. It would not be a quick and easy victory. She requested a transfer to a ship at the rear of the fleet. Her commander laughed at her cowardice, but Telix did not care about her reputation anymore. She only cared about survival, because somewhere in the cold mathematics of human history, she had found a simple truth. Humanity did not lose wars they were prepared for. They had never lost a war they were prepared for, and they had been preparing for this one for 50 years. The coalition fleet continued its advance toward Earth. 10,000 ships against a single species. It should have been overwhelming. It should have been terrifying. But on Earth, people went to work. Children went to school. Families ate dinner together and complained about ordinary problems. The alien fleet was barely mentioned. Just another news story in a world full of news stories. Just another day. Just another challenge. Humanity had faced worse. They always had. And they were still here. The fleet would learn what that meant soon enough. Admiral Kethvorn's patience had run out. 3 days of advancing through the Sol system, and humanity had not responded with anything except traffic advisories and restaurant recommendations. The coalition fleet had received 17 different notices about parking violations, 2 warnings about littering in space, and 1 politely worded suggestion that they consider purchasing tourist passes for the scenic route past Saturn. It was insulting. It was humiliating. And it was going to end now. Target the mining outpost on asteroid 4770 to Gamma, the Admiral ordered. Civilian installation, minimal defenses. We will show them what happens to species that ignore the coalition's warnings. Fleet Commander Yoroth stepped forward with concern on his face. Admiral, attacking civilians without final warning violates the protocols of engagement. The Council may object. The Council gave me authority to use necessary force. Humanity has refused every attempt at communication. They have mocked our presence. They need to understand that we are serious. Keth Vorn turned to his weapons officer. Fire when ready. The Eternal Dominion's main batteries powered up with a sound like thunder. Energy gathered in the massive weapons that could crack moons. On the asteroid below, 47 humans worked in the mining facility. Completely unaware that they had been chosen as examples. The weapons fired, or tried to fire. The energy simply stopped. The batteries powered down without releasing their deadly load. Warning lights flashed across every console on the bridge. And then the music started. It was human music, loud and chaotic, filled with screaming vocals and pounding rhythms. It played on every speaker in the fleet, drowning out all other sounds. Every attempt to shut it down failed. Every frequency was overwhelmed. What is happening? Keth Vorn shouted over the noise. Unknown, Admiral, Veth yelled back. Our systems are experiencing massive interference. Navigation is offline. Weapons are locked. Communications are... He stopped, staring at his screen in horror. Admiral, our weapons are targeting our own ships. The Admiral looked at the tactical display. Every weapon in the fleet had redirected itself. 10,000 ships pointing their guns at each other, ready to fire on command. But not his command. Someone else's command. And then a new contact appeared on the sensors. A single ship, approaching from the direction of the asteroid they had tried to destroy. It was old, battered, with patches of different colored metal covering its hull like scars. The identification beacon labeled it as the UES Tuesday afternoon. We are being hailed, Veth said. The view screen flickered. A human face appeared. A man in his 60s, with gray hair and dark skin and eyes that had seen too much to be impressed by alien fleets. He sat in a command chair that looked almost as old as his ship, surrounded by equipment that seemed to be held together with tape and determination. Good morning, the human said. His voice was calm, almost friendly. I'm Captain James Okonkwo of the Tuesday afternoon. I notice you were about to shoot at some miners. I'd appreciate it if you didn't do that. Keth Vorn forced himself to speak through his rage. You dare interfere with coalition military operations? We have 10,000 ships. You have 1. I can count, thank you. Captain Okonkwo did not seem concerned. The thing is, those miners didn't do anything to you. They're just folks trying to make a living. Mining rocks isn't a crime, last I checked. So I thought I'd come over and ask you to reconsider. You thought, the Admiral could barely form words. You thought you would ask us to reconsider? With 1 ship against 10,000? Well, I also turned off your weapons and redirected them at your own fleet, Okonkwo said. Seemed polite to mention that. That is impossible. Our systems are protected by the most advanced security in the galaxy. The captain shrugged. Your security was pretty good. Took us almost 30 seconds to crack it. My engineer says it was the hardest thing she's done all week. She's been pretty bored lately, so that's actually a compliment. Keth Vorn looked at Yoroth, then at the rest of his command staff. They all shared the same expression of stunned disbelief. This could not be happening. 1 ship could not disable an entire fleet. 1 human could not speak to the greatest military force in the galaxy as if they were children. Being scolded for misbehavior. Release our systems immediately, the Admiral demanded. Happy to, Okonkwo said. Just as soon as you agree not to shoot at civilians. Or anyone else, actually. Shooting people is generally frowned upon in this part of space. We will destroy you. You'll try. The captain leaned back in his chair. "Here's the thing, Admiral. I've been doing this job for 40 years. I've faced pirates, rebels, rogue AI, and one really angry asteroid that turned out to be alive. I was at the Battle of Titan when the Collective tried to wipe out our outer colonies. I watched my best friend die at Proxima when the Raiders came. I've seen things that would make your worst nightmares look like pleasant dreams." He smiled. "And there was no fear in it. And I'm 3 weeks from retirement. My wife is planning a party. My grandchildren are making decorations. I'm supposed to spend the rest of my life fishing on a lake in Minnesota. So trust me when I tell you that I really, really don't want to die today. But I will if I have to. Because those miners on that asteroid, they're my people. And nobody threatens my people. You cannot stop us," Keth Vorn said. But his voice had lost some of its certainty. "Even if you control our weapons now, we will find a way around your interference. We have 10,000 ships. Yes, you keep mentioning that." Okonkwo touched a control on his chair. "Let me show you something." The view screen split into dozens of images. Ships appearing throughout the Sol system. Not civilian vessels. Warships. Human warships of designs the Coalition had never seen before. They emerged from behind moons, from within asteroid fields, from the shadow of planets. Hundreds of them. Then thousands. Then more, until the count became meaningless. "We've been watching you since you entered the system," the captain said. "We've been watching you since you gathered your fleet in Coalition space. We've been watching you since Verthax first proposed this little adventure 30 years ago. Did you really think we didn't know this was coming?" Keth Vorn stared at the display. The human fleet was larger than his own. Much larger. And these were not the primitive vessels the Coalition's intelligence had reported. These were weapons of war unlike anything he had ever seen. "We could have destroyed you the moment you arrived," Okonkwo continued. "We didn't. Do you know why?" The Admiral could not speak. His scales had gone pale with something he had not felt in decades. "Fear. Because we don't want to," the captain said. "Because killing 10,000 ships full of living beings isn't something we do lightly. Because most of you are probably just soldiers following orders. And you don't deserve to die for your leader's stupidity." He leaned forward, and his eyes hardened. "But we will, if we have to. If you force us to choose between your lives and our people's safety, we will choose our people. Every single time." The music stopped. The weapons unlocked. The fleet's systems returned to normal operation. "You have a choice," Okonkwo said. "You can turn around and go home. Tell your council whatever story you want. We don't care about credit or glory. We just want to be left alone." He paused. "Or you can try to continue your attack, and you'll find out exactly what humanity is capable of when we stop being polite." The transmission ended. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, silence ruled. 10,000 ships hung in space, their weapons ready, their crews waiting. But nobody moved. Nobody spoke, because they had all seen the human fleet. They had all heard the captain's words, and they had all realized the same terrible truth. The Coalition had not come to conquer humanity. They had come to wake a sleeping giant dot, and now they had to decide whether to run or to learn exactly what that meant. Dot in her small observation vessel. Telix watched the human ships on her sensors. She had been right. She had been right about everything. And now the fate of 10,000 ships depended on what Admiral Keth Vorn decided to do next. She began recording everything. Whatever happened, the galaxy needed to know. The galaxy needed to understand. Humanity was not a young species to be conquered. They were a warning, a lesson written in the stars, and the Coalition had finally begun to read it. The negotiations took place on a space station orbiting Mars. It was a neutral location, chosen by the humans and accepted by a coalition that no longer felt confident about choosing anything. The station was called Harmony Point, and it had been built specifically for moments like this. Moments when the galaxy needed to talk instead of fight. Admiral Keth Vorn did not attend. After the confrontation with Captain Okonkwo, he had locked himself in his quarters and refused to speak to anyone. Fleet Commander Yorith led the Coalition delegation instead, along with representatives from each of the 12 species. Telix had somehow convinced her superiors to include her as a junior observer. She suspected they agreed only because nobody else wanted the job. The human delegation arrived without ceremony. No military escort, no display of power. Just 3 people in simple clothes who walked into the conference room, like they were attending a business meeting. The leader was a woman named Margaret Osei, Earth's Secretary of External Affairs. She smiled warmly as she took her seat. "Thank you all for coming," she said. "I know this has been a difficult few days. Would anyone like coffee? We have excellent coffee on this station." Yoroth stared at her. "You disabled our entire fleet. You have thousands of warships pointed at us. And you are offering us coffee?" "Yes, it's very good coffee. I promise." She poured herself a cup and took a slow sip. "But I understand if you'd prefer to skip the pleasantries. Let's talk about why we're really here. You have threatened the coalition with destruction." Yoroth said. "That is why we are here. To understand your intentions." Osei shook her head. "No, we haven't threatened anyone. We've defended ourselves. There's a difference." She set down her cup. "You came to our home with 10,000 warships. You declared war on our species. You tried to attack a civilian mining outpost. We stopped you. That's not a threat. That's a response. Your response suggests capabilities far beyond what we believed you possessed." "Yes, it does." She smiled again, but this time there was something sharper in her expression. "And that was intentional. Do you know why?" Nobody answered. The coalition representatives sat in uncomfortable silence, waiting. "Because we've been watching the galaxy for 200 years, Osei continued. "We detected your communications long before you detected us. We learned your languages, studied your cultures, mapped your civilizations, and we saw how you treat younger species." She pulled up a display on the table's central screen. Images appeared, world after world, species after species, civilizations that had been absorbed into the galactic community, peoples who had been reduced to servants and laborers, their cultures destroyed, their potential wasted. The Morthani, the Dreth, the Varani, all of them were younger species once. All of them were given a choice, surrender or be conquered. None of them were allowed to grow on their own terms. None of them were permitted to reach their true potential. Telix shifted uncomfortably in her seat. The images showed her own species among the others. The Varani had joined the galactic community 6 centuries ago, and she had always been taught it was a blessing. But looking at these images now, she wondered how much of her people's history had been erased. "We decided that would not be our fate," Osei said. "So we prepared, quietly, patiently, for 50 years. We built what we would need to defend ourselves, not to conquer, not to threaten, just to survive. If your intentions are peaceful," Yoroth said carefully, "why do you have a fleet larger than ours?" "Because peace requires strength. Because the galaxy does not respect weakness. Because your coalition proved exactly why we needed those ships when you gathered your fleet and came to threaten us." Osei leaned back in her chair. "But here's what you need to understand. We don't want to use them. We have never wanted to use them. Every resource we spent on weapons is a resource we didn't spend on art, on science, on exploration. We hate that we needed to build them. Then why?" Yoroth seemed genuinely confused. "If you hate war, if you desired peace, why prepare for something you did not want? Because wanting peace doesn't mean you get peace. We learned that lesson a long time ago, from our own history." Osei's expression grew distant for a moment. "Our species has fought itself for thousands of years. Wars over land, over resources, over ideas, over nothing at all. We've seen what happens when people are not prepared to defend themselves. We've seen the cost of weakness." She looked directly at Yoroth. "We don't want to fight you. We don't want to hurt you. But we will protect ourselves and our people, no matter what. That is not negotiable. That will never be negotiable." The room fell silent again. Telix found herself leaning forward, fascinated despite her fear. She had studied humanity for years, but she had never truly understood them until this moment. They were not aggressive conquerors. They were not peaceful innocents. They were something more complex, something more dangerous. They were survivors. And survivors did whatever they had to do. "What do you want?" Yoroth finally asked. "If not war, if not conquest, what does humanity want from the galaxy?" Osei smiled. "We want to be left alone. We want to grow at our own pace, explore in our own way, make our own mistakes. We want to trade with species who wish to trade, learn from cultures who wish to teach." Share what we've discovered with those who are interested." She paused. "And we want to help. Help? There are species out there who are in the same position we were 50 years ago. Young civilizations, just reaching for the stars, about to be absorbed or destroyed by older powers. We want to protect them. Give them the chance we gave ourselves." Her eyes hardened. "The galaxy's habit of crushing young species ends now. With us." The coalition representatives exchanged uncomfortable glances. This was not what they had expected. This was not surrender. This was not even negotiation, really. This was a statement. A declaration. A line drawn in the stars. "You are challenging the fundamental order of galactic civilization." Yorith said slowly. "Yes," Osei agreed. "We are. The Council will not accept this. High Arbiter Verthax will not accept this. Verthax is welcome to object. We'll listen politely, and then we'll continue doing what we believe is right." She stood up, signaling that the meeting was nearing its end. "You have a choice, the same choice we're offering everyone. You can work with us as partners and equals. You can ignore us and go about your business. Or you can oppose us and discover that we meant every word." She walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. "Oh, one more thing. We know about Verthax's backup plan. The planet killer he has hidden in the fourth ship of the third column. We've known about it since he gave the order to arm it." Yorith's face went pale. Several other delegates looked equally shocked. They had not known about the planet killer. Verthax had kept it secret from everyone. "We could have destroyed that ship the moment it entered our system," Osei said. "We didn't, because we wanted to give you a chance to make the right choice." She smiled one last time. "Choose wisely." She left. The door closed behind her. Telix sat in the silence that followed, her mind racing. The humans had known about the planet killer. They had known about everything, and they had still chosen to talk instead of fight. That was not weakness. That was not naivety. That was something else entirely. It was mercy. Mercy given by those strong enough to destroy their enemies, but wise enough to know that destruction solved nothing. She looked at the coalition delegates around her. They were afraid now, afraid of what humanity could do. But she saw something else in their eyes as well, something that looked almost like shame, because humanity had shown them what true strength looked like, and it was nothing like what the coalition had believed. True strength was not about weapons or ships or conquering weaker species. True strength was about having the power to destroy and choosing not to. The coalition had come to Sol System to teach humanity a lesson. Instead, humanity had taught them one. Telix wondered if anyone would remember it. She wondered if anyone would learn. She hoped so. For the galaxy's sake, she really hoped so. High Arbiter Verthax refused to accept defeat. In his private chamber on the coalition flagship, surrounded by loyal guards and communication equipment that he believed was secure, he gave the order that would change everything. "Activate the silence protocol." He commanded. "Target, Earth, fire when ready." The planet killer was an ancient weapon, built during a forgotten war and hidden away for exactly this kind of moment. It could destroy a world in minutes. It could end a species before they even knew they were dying. And Verthax was certain it was his secret advantage, his final card to play. The weapon powered up. The targeting systems locked onto Earth. In seconds, humanity's homeworld would be nothing but dust and memory. Then the power died. The weapon shut down, and Verthax found himself staring at a small package that had appeared on his desk as if by magic. It was wrapped in colorful paper with a ribbon on top. A small card was attached. Verthax opened it with trembling claws. "Dear High Arbiter," the card read, "we noticed you were about to make a very bad decision. We've taken the liberty of preventing it. Enclosed is a souvenir from your weapons core. We thought it would make a nice paperweight. Please consider this a gentle reminder that we've been watching everything since before your fleet left Coalition space. Also, you might want to talk to someone about your anger issues. We can recommend some excellent therapists. Best wishes, the Tuesday afternoon crew." Inside the package was a piece of metal. Verthax recognized it immediately. It was the firing mechanism from the planet killer. Without it, the weapon was useless. He sat down heavily, his scales gone completely white. They had known. They had always known. And they had let him try anyway, just to prove a point. The Coalition Council met 1 hour later. The secret was out. Everyone knew about the planet killer now, about Verthax's attempt to use it, about how the humans had stopped him without firing a single shot. The 12 species that had formed the coalition were no longer united. Half of them were furious at Verthax for risking their lives with his secret weapon. The other half were terrified that the humans might decide to punish them all for his actions. Fleet Commander Yorith took command. It was the only logical choice. Verthax was removed from his position and confined to quarters, waiting for a trial that would likely end his career and possibly his freedom. We have one option, Yorith told the council. We accept humanity's terms. We leave their space. We return home and inform the Galactic Council that humanity is not a species to be conquered. He paused. Some of us may face consequences for this failure, but we will be alive to face them. That is more than we can say if we continue this confrontation. There was no argument. There was no debate. The vote was unanimous. The coalition fleet began its withdrawal the next morning. 10,000 ships turned away from Earth and started the long journey home. They had come as conquerors. They left as something else entirely. Not quite allies, not quite friends, but no longer enemies. Telix did not leave with them. She had submitted her request for asylum 3 hours after the council meeting. To her surprise, it was approved almost immediately. The humans seemed pleased to have her. They said they valued her perspective, her knowledge of galactic civilization, her willingness to see them as something more than threats or curiosities. She was assigned quarters on Harmony Station while her permanent status was processed. It was small but comfortable, with a window that looked out at the stars. She spent hours staring through that window, trying to understand everything that had happened. On her 3rd day, there was a knock at her door. She opened it to find Ambassador Sarah Chen standing in the hallway, holding a bottle of something amber-colored. "I thought you might want some company," Sarah said. "And I brought whiskey. It helps with culture shock." They sat together by the window, drinking and talking. Sarah told her about Earth, about humanity's history, about the choices they had made and the costs they had paid. Telix told her about the Varani, about growing up in a civilization that had forgotten it was once free, about the doubts she had carried for years without ever speaking them aloud. "Why did you let us go?" Telix finally asked. "You could have destroyed the fleet. You could have sent a message to the entire galaxy. Instead, you just let us leave." Sarah smiled and took another sip of whiskey. "Because destroying your fleet wouldn't have sent the message we wanted to send. Fear doesn't change people. Fear just makes them wait for a chance to strike back." She looked out at the stars. "We want the galaxy to understand that humanity isn't their enemy. We want them to see that power doesn't have to mean cruelty. We want them to know that there's another way. And if they don't understand, if they come back with a bigger fleet, then we'll stop them again. As many times as it takes." Sarah shrugged. "We're patient. We've had to be. Our entire history has been learning how to survive things that should have killed us. One more challenge won't break us." Telix thought about that for a long time. She thought about the coalition, about Verthax, about all the civilizations that had risen and fallen across the galaxy. None of them had been like humanity. None of them had combined such capacity for violence with such commitment to restraint. "You're going to change everything," she said quietly. "The whole galaxy. Everything is going to be different because of you." "Maybe," Sarah agreed. "Or maybe we'll fail. Maybe we'll make mistakes. Maybe humanity will stumble and fall like every other civilization before us." She smiled. "But we're going to try. That's all we can do. Try to be better. Try to build something worth building. Try to leave the universe a little better than we found it." She raised her glass. To trying, Telix raised her own glass. To trying, they drank together, two representatives of very different species, watching the stars turn slowly outside the window. On Earth, life continued as it always had. The coalition fleet was gone. The crisis was over, and most humans had already forgotten about it. There were jobs to do, families to care for, ordinary problems to solve. The universe was vast and full of dangers, but today was peaceful, and that was enough. Captain James Okonkwo finally got his retirement party. His wife had decorated their small house with banners and streamers. His grandchildren ran around the yard, playing games and laughing. Old friends came to wish him well, to share stories, to celebrate a career that had spanned for decades of service. Nobody mentioned the confrontation with the coalition fleet. Nobody thanked him for standing between 10,000 warships and 47 miners. It was just another mission, just another day in the life of a naval officer. The kind of thing that happened and then faded into the background of history. His wife found him standing alone on the porch as the sun set, watching the sky turn orange and gold. "Everything okay?" she asked. He nodded. "Just thinking about the aliens?" "No." He smiled and put his arm around her. "About tomorrow. I was thinking I might go fishing. The lake should be beautiful this time of year." She laughed and leaned into him. "That sounds perfect." They stood together, watching the stars appear one by one as night fell. Somewhere up there, the coalition fleet was retreating. Somewhere up there, a young Varani was learning what humanity really meant. Somewhere up there, the galaxy was changing in ways that would take centuries to fully understand. But James Okonkwo was not thinking about any of that. He was thinking about fishing rods and peaceful mornings, and the simple joy of being home. Humanity had faced another challenge and survived. They always did, and tomorrow would be just another day. The news that night mentioned the alien fleet's departure in a brief segment, sandwiched between weather reports and sports scores. A reporter explained that the diplomatic situation had been resolved, and that there was no cause for concern. Most viewers changed the channel before the segment ended. In her small apartment in Tokyo, a young woman watched the report while eating dinner. She shrugged and went back to studying for her exams. In a pub in London, old men raised their glasses to a crisis averted and returned to their conversations about football. In a village in Nigeria, children played in the streets without knowing that the stars above them had almost gone dark. Life went on. That was humanity's greatest strength. Not their weapons, not their technology, not their military power. Their ability to face the end of everything and then wake up the next morning ready to start again. The galaxy would learn this lesson eventually. They would learn that humanity could not be frightened, could not be broken, could not be stopped. Not because humans were invincible, but because they refused to stay down. Because every defeat only made them stronger. Because every challenge only proved what they were capable of. And because, at the end of everything, they would still be standing ready for tomorrow, ready for whatever came next, just another day.